Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Joe Taylor. This morning, another in the ongoing series of programs presented by the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning. The program, through the Northwest Institute of Research, oversees a grant from the Office of Child Development and Early Learning at the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services and the Department of Education. The goal of the program is to improve the outcomes for young children as they prepare for school. John Posa from the Pennsylvania Key is the host of the program and is with us throughout the series. Well, good morning, John, and who do we have on the line this morning?
Good morning, Joe. This morning we have Micha Archer, who is the author-illustrator of the current 2017 Pennsylvania One book, Daniel Finds a Poem. So while Daniel Finds a Poem is the fourth book that Micha has illustrated, it's the very first that she has written and illustrated. So welcome to the program, Micha.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Thank you. We're very excited to talk to you about the book. Now, I know the idea for the book came to you from a sketch of a little boy on a stage, but tell us a little bit about the story itself and how Daniel goes about his journey.
Okay, well, he started with a sketch that I did that my agent saw, and he actually wasn't my agent at the moment, but I was wooing him. And so when he liked that sketch, I thought I should make a story. And so starting a story from the end is actually a great way to do it, because you really have to figure out, what the journey is to the end. And so I thought if this was going to be the one book I wrote, I really wanted to fill it with all the things that I loved. And so this little boy named Daniel, he loves the park, and he loves all the animals in the park. So one day he's in the park, and he sees a sign that says poetry reading, Sunday at 6. And so it's on Monday. So he says, "What is poetry?" And he's answered by a spider, and the spider says, "Poetry to me is when morning dew glistens." And so that sparks something in Daniel, and he thinks, I want to find out if other animals have different answers. And so each day of the week he gets a new answer from a different animal from the park, and at the end of the week he has a poem that he's combined all the answers of the animals into a poem that he reads at the poetry reading. So it's about many things, this book. It's not only about poetry, it's about nature and the days of the week and the times of the day and the senses and parks and being outside and many things, community gatherings, working together, the poetry inside of you, stories that you have. So it's about many things.
And that's what's so great from the early learning standpoint and a literacy standpoint, that it touches on so many different areas that kids learn from. But what really is unique, too, is the fact that you incorporated poetry into the story itself. And so many look at poetry as thinking that lines have to always rhyme in order for that to be a poem, and that's not the case.
No, I think actually children are natural poets.
Yeah.
They often will ask you the bizarre questions about the world, and you think, wow, how did they even come up with that? And, I love poetry, but I don't think of myself as a poet, but certain lines of a poem will hit me, and I really felt like I wanted to put those in a book. And I see poets that I love are Mary Oliver, because of how much she talks about nature, and Gwendolyn Brooks in how she plays with words and makes these simple poems that just completely invoke incredible places and feelings. And Robert Frost, who often talked about stone walls, where there's a stone wall in my book.
Right.
And Emily Dickinson, of course, who grew up in the town right next to us, and so is a big part of my growing up was going to her house and learning about her interesting existence in her room, and she used to take a basket and lower it to children with I think gingerbread in it, because she spent so much time by herself, but loved to make connections with nature and children. So it was a way to bring poets that I love alive in the book, and also maybe make children think maybe they could be a poet someday too.
I was interested in why you chose to link a young boy's adventure in nature as a vehicle to introduce him to poetry. You have a boy, you have nature, that's a link, and then carry it a link further to poetry. What was the thought process in that?
I think I wanted it to be sort of a learning tool, and also a way for a child to be interested in an animal's habitat, and they sort of imagine themselves as an animal. And, words can, I think of poetry as a way of almost explaining to a person who can't see a feeling, or a way of painting a picture. So I'm not sure how to answer the question, but it just felt like if I'm going to fill a book with words, I want them to evoke feelings about places they might visit someday, or feelings they might have inside of them. So
I was asking specifically in terms of young boys probably liking nature, so were you using that as a vehicle then to introduce them to poetry through a portal that they would, be going through anyhow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was... That's the way I saw it, because I think that's kind of a natural thing. Hence nature, natural, and going to the zoo and seeing the animals and getting a take for their perspective. But we're on the show with Micha Archer, who is the 2017 author of Daniel Fine's poem of the PA1 book series, and she is from Western Massachusetts, which is near Amherst. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about how you did the book, and this was the first book that you had actually, you're mostly known as an illustrator, but this is your first one where you actually authored. I found it unique that you first got the idea from noticing a boy on a stage with a poem, and then you had to build your story from sort of like the ending. Mm-hmm. That's really not all that unusual when I talk to other folks that have written books. They know how they want it to end, but it's building the story. Mm-hmm. But that, does that make it any harder? Do you think more difficult in developing the story or not?
No, I think it was easier. In fact,
right.
It was. I think as I was doing, I was thinking about I was a kindergarten teacher, and my mother was a preschool teacher, and I remember actually when I was young going to visit her classroom and watching her take a book called The Mitten, which is about all these animals who are trying to get out of the cold, so they each squeeze into this mitten. And the whole idea of gathering, each page gathering more and more animals together, and until, the final, I think in the end of the mitten, the whole mitten explodes and they all run away.
Right.
But just the idea of gathering on each page a new person or a new idea, it was a nice structure to work with. It felt pretty smooth. So, and I was really thinking about how teachers would be able to use this in their teaching, because I really found books were an incredible way to introduce ideas to kids and make them realize that the other side of reading is writing. So, not only are they learning to read, they're also getting ideas for maybe someday writing stories themselves. So.
Now, typically with the one book series, and as each book is announced, there's generally an activity guide that to use the storyline and the book in reading to children and activities associated with it. So can you give us a little bit of a preview or a sneak peek of what teachers and parents can do around the theme of the book in working with children?
Sure. I actually, the resources, if you go to their website, it already has on the page it says resources, and you click on there, and it has something that you can download. I think it's 65 pages, and it is unbelievable. It just makes me want to go back into teaching it because the ideas are so wonderful. Let me think. There's book lists, and then there's rhymes and songs. Some of the songs that I made up to use when I go to classrooms, and I hope to be doing when I do my talk also. Right. Because I really feel like music helps keep kids engaged whenever you read to them or anything. And so there's great fun facts about animals, like, for example, did you know that squirrels actually help plant trees? Because when they bury their acorns, a lot of them end up trees, and that dragonflies can fly backwards, and chipmunks can carry 32 beech nuts at one time in their cheeks. And then there's ways that you can act out the story, wonderful projects. And then there's talking about different kinds of poetry, like concrete poems, which are poems that make a shape so that it's combining art and the words, and talking about picture walks, which is a great thing to use with preschoolers because you can just just show the book to the kid without the whole group of kids without telling them what the story is, and they can try to figure out what the book is about, or actually just create their own stories just from looking at the pictures. And that gives them an idea that a book is, a journey, and that you're not only reading the words, you're also reading pictures when you are reading picture books, and that makes it accessible to even kids who aren't reading yet. Absolutely.
And I wanted to mention that for those who are interested in learning more about the book or purchasing the book, we mentioned about the PA1 book. And of course, you can learn more and purchase the book at www.pa1book.org. And of course, Micha has her own website. It's Micha Archer, www.michaarcher.com, and also look at it that way as well. Typically, Micha, the author of every one book schedules a tour when it's released, which is always in April, as part of Week of the Young Child or Month of the Young Child activities. Do you have? Can you tell us where some of the locations are that you're going to be visiting and reading to the kids?
I'm going to be all over Pennsylvania. I start in Harrisburg with a kickoff event. I think it was the 31st, but I have to check. No, the 28th. And then the 28th of March. And then we go to State College. Then we go to Johnstown, Altoona, Indiana. And then we go to Pittsburgh. And then up Oil City, and then Warren. This is going to be great for me because I don't know Pennsylvania at all. So my husband's going to be my driver, and we are going to learn Pennsylvania. And then the second 2 weeks will be over all in the eastern part of the state. I've got a map of Pennsylvania with all these little arrows and dots, so I can figure out my whole schedule. But
and I was going to say that when the schedule is formally confirmed, I believe that will be posted as well on the pa1book.org website.
And some of those aren't too far from us, Indiana, and the other one was Oil City, which right in our neighborhood.
Oh, good. Great.
I have a question about the construction of a children's book and how you go about writing it. When you set out to write a children's book on a given topic, do you consciously then add other subtopics to be part of that story, or do they just kind of flow as natural threads as you write? I mean, so in a sense, are you ad-libbing, or, okay, down the road here, next chapter, next page, I'm going to go into this topic, this topic, this topic, or is it a more natural process?
It's a really a natural process, I think, but also I do think it's really important when you're thinking about children's books or any book, I think, is to have several themes going at the same time, because you're going to grab different kids in different ways, because kids have different learning styles. And I was excited that I was actually illustrating and writing, so I could know that when you turn the page to the spider web, maybe suddenly a child who was fidgeting might go, oh, and say, wow, I have never seen how beautiful a spider web could look when the drops are on it, catching the morning light. So that's why I really felt like I wanted to put all kinds of themes in this book at the same time. But then that you also have to hold it together with one main theme, or the words have to make sense. So, but yeah, it's a little bit of both, actually.
Another question on that, and that is, do you, on occasion, I imagine you do, have a situation where you're actually getting feedback from kids as they read the book, whatever book it is that you've written, and does this maybe, do they come up with a different feeling of what you were telling, or what the story was, or what they thought it was than you intended? That must be a very, very interesting experience, I would imagine.
Oh yes, I do my market research on my children and my nieces, who are young nieces. So I will often try it out on them, and if something's not making sense, I know to go back and dive in. Or if they seem bored, I know to figure out how to make it more exciting or interesting to them. But yeah, that is it's definitely a long process. It takes much, and it may seem like it's simple, like this seems like a simple story, but I think simplifying can sometimes take the most work, because you're really trying to get the essence, and you need to chop things away and not have distractions. You need to keep the flow and keep it so it's clear, especially for children. So
Right.
It's kind of like writing haiku, I think.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned, you're doing your informal market research on how kids, what ideas they get from it. But at the same time, that's such valuable information, because in some ways maybe you might gain something from a particular child that may pique your interest in extending the book, maybe along a similar theme, but maybe in another direction. So, almost like a continuation sometimes.
Or a sequel, which
a
Daniel
sequel.
will have a sequel.
Oh, do we? Is that an announcement?
That's an announcement.
Oh, that'll be great. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. Absolutely. It must have been a real. And since this was your first book, you're mainly known as an illustrator and artist. This is your first book that you actually put the words to the pictures. It probably, obviously, was a lot more challenging than the books he had done, or the work that he had done before.
Oh, definitely. It was great, because I don't think I had thought about how hard writing is, but at the same time, it was more interesting to me because it was so vast, and there was just like this element of almost solving a puzzle to get to the right words, and I love puzzles, and I know that when you're doing puzzles, sometimes you just work and work at something, and then you walk away from it, and bing, suddenly the idea comes to you. So it's almost as if you get your brain all swirling in a way, and then your subconscious just starts to work also. And even dreams, I do feel like the Daniel book came to me partly in a dream, because I do wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and write something down, because I feel like I better get this down. And I think it is because you're subconscious starts to work for you. So,
In the past, I've interviewed songwriters, and the stock question that you ask a songwriter is what comes first, the music or the lyrics. So in your case, I'll amend that a little bit. What comes first, the words or the pictures?
In this case, it was the words, which is funny to say because I felt like I was such the illustrator. I remember asking an editor, which is more important, the words or the pictures, and the editor said, of course, the words. And I was, an illustrator mostly back then, so I was a little bit insulted. But then I realized, that's what you do remember. Like when you think of all the children's books that you loved as a kid, it was the words that you remembered. But the illustrator has a huge part of actually getting you to that image to stick in your mind. Like you'll remember the cover of the book because that image sticks with you. So
absolutely. And just so our listeners know, if you go on Micha's website, MichaArcher.com, there is actually a video that you can actually see that shows how Micha had developed the pages, the artwork that was involved, and the design work of the pages themselves. And I found that very, very fascinating, very creative.
Thank you. Yeah, that is it. I think it helps to just see people working. I'm always, when I see a craft, a picture of somebody of a craft, when I see the person doing the craft, it just makes you realize, oh, I see how they do it. And it's much better than just still pictures, I think.
Right.
Video really helps.
Hey, I don't know if you are permitted to do this or if it's actually finished yet, but can you give us a little hint of the sequel for Daniel Finds a Poem? It's coming out next year, right?
Daniel will be coming back again, and it's this one where he's going to be asking people what makes a good day for them. So it's kind of the same idea where my daughter calls it crowdsourcing, where he's gathering, and what it ends up being is a recipe for a good day. So he's asking different people and workers what's important to them might be that it doesn't rain on them, and another worker, a gardener might say, actually, I do need that rain. So it's kind of, working with different themes, but basically the same idea where little Daniel is that curious little boy who's trying to learn about the world about him.
Well, Micha, we're getting about 1 minute left on the show. We want to thank you for being on, and we wanted to remind listeners that, as part of Month of the Young Child, go volunteer to your local library or your local preschool and read to children, especially read Daniel Finds a Poem, because that's kind of like, you should be encouraged to read to children all the time, not just on 1 month of the year or 1 week of the year. But Daniel Finds a Poem will be available. All licensed preschools and child cares in Pennsylvania and museums will have the book. So there'll be plenty of copies available. So, Micha, I wanted to thank you for being on the program, and good luck with your tour, and hopefully we'll catch up with you someplace along the way.
I hope so, and thank you so much for inviting me. This is exciting to have the audience of people I love, children and teachers and parents.
And that's our program for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks at this same time. In the meantime, you can go online to learn more at papromiseforchildren.com. For John Posa and the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning, I'm Joe Taylor. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.